Welcome to Agoracom Beyond the AGM. This is the first time we've done this with Bernard Thurion, who's President and CEO of HPQ Silicon. Yesterday was the company's AGM in Quebec. Naturally, most shareholders can't be there because they aren't resident in and around Montreal. So Bernard's with us today in order to go through some of the presentation slides. Bernard, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Before we get into the presentation slide that you made for everyone at the show, tell us how the AGM go in terms of voting, any surprises? I presume that you're still sitting there, so shareholders are still very, very happy with your job, but how did everything go yesterday?
I was very well. We were sort of joking that internally that we got 2N approval, all 99. I only got 1N. I got 98.7, but, close. I got 1N plus. So we were joking about this, but no, it was a very good turnout. I'm very happy for just a simple bureaucratic AGM that we got a higher number of shares voted than last year, and we got a higher percentage. Having 42% of the shares outstanding voted, I think bodes very, very well for our future. And it's a demonstration that we have a core of investors that really like what we do, and they're supporting management and the board in the implementation of what we're doing.
Well, I think things like this, because you've been constantly outreaching, constantly talking to your shareholders, I think that makes a big difference. So today, we're talking about the presentation. So I'm going to bring that up on the on my screen share. So everyone, I'm going to ask us to bear with me for a second while I bring this up.
Yeah.
All right, okay. Bernard, you can see that?
Yeah, I can see it. I can see my own presentation.
All right, I wanted to make sure because the first time we're using this format actually, but I know it's going to work out well.
Yeah, no. See, listen. The idea was it sort of would have been impossible to tape the AGM, so we just wanted to give shareholders that couldn't come the opportunity to at least have me explain the presentation more in detail. It's going to be a bit more fun. So let's start there. We're becoming the world leader in producing low-cost green solar silicon. That plan hasn't changed, or that objective hasn't changed. We're still pushing on that. We can go to
and Bernard, we came up with that slogan, more than a year ago, but you still feel very confident as a company about this mission statement?
More and more and more, and I'll explain it more as we move on different slides. So we go to slide 2. This one's a disclaimer. All right, we have to stop for a second here. We do have to stop. I'd like people to realize that some of the things we say are forward-looking statements, but we are working very diligently to make sure that happens. If there's changes come in. Go to the next slide, which is the one I really find really fascinating, because we talk that we're in the solar business, but we're in the silicon business. What's the implication? Well, according to Canada Solar and everything else, right now, only 1% of the world energy is produced using solar system. The trend, the belief, and that comes from multiple sources, is that by about 2030, the goal is to have 10% of that doing. Okay. What does that represent for us? Why does that represent such a big opportunity for HPQ? Well, simply to go from the amount right now, the gigawatt produced right now, which is 319, which is 1%, up to 1,815, okay, will require massive new solar system installed. What people have to realize, for each gigawatt of new power installed, we need 5,000 tons of solar-grade silicon metal. Okay?
For each gigawatt.
Each gigawatt. Overall, to reach that goal, all right, assuming that we reach that goal by just increasing year over year, it's not the way it's going to go, but year over year, it would require 540,000 tons of solar-grade silicon metal of demand every year. Right now, worldwide economically viable capacity is only 350,000 tons.
So we got a big shortfall.
Big shortfall that is coming on through. It isn't there, it hasn't been realized. And people have to realize that our shortfall is so huge, we equal to one lithium market. The entire lithium market, okay, is our shortage year over year. So by each year, I grow by one lithium market, or my market grows by one lithium market. Right now, economically, there's only 350,000 tons can be produced. The barriers to entries to building new capacities are extremely high. Depending on the process capex, for a 10,000 ton unit, it's going to cost anywhere between $700 million US to $1 billion US.
And that's for the old guys, Not for
That's
us.
where the old guy. Those are traditional process and everything else.
Right.
It's a low margin environment because there was overcapacity for 15 years. It's a low margin capacity. It sells for 15. It costs between 10 to 17 to make. It's hard to justify the capex investment other than that. Third problem is environmental permitting in any, normal environment, other than, some countries that don't really care about the environment, basically make it very, very difficult. So you have massive barrier to entries. This is where we come in. The next slide.
And then environmental permitting is because of the process that you'll talk about here in a bit.
Well, it's basically nasty byproduct and everything else. So right now in the world, all right, the segment we're attacking is the first 3 segment, which is basically right now the traditional process. You take quartz, you first transform it into metallurgic grade silicon metal. Purity about 98.5 to 99.5. Okay. Then you have to further refine it to go to solar grade silicon metal, which starts at, depending on the process, a UMG Alchem is at 4N plus. Okay. And the plus is really the key part of this. And then you make a solar wafer, and then you make the solar system and everything else. So what we're doing, what's really different, is we're combining these 2 steps. And we're the only one in the world right now that have demonstrated lab scale that we can not only transform quartz into silicon metal, but purify.
And that's the one-step process.
It's a one-step process. There'll be additional process once the system is out to get it up to solar wafer, but it's a one-step process. It gets us ahead of the curve right there. So why is that so good? Well, a one-step process, right now the numbers tells us we'll be able to reduce OPEX by about 80%, reduce CAPEX by 95%, reduce carbon footprint by a minimum of 75%, and I think when the numbers are going to be finished, it's going to be much higher than this. And we eliminate the production of nasty byproduct, aka our environmental permitting issues are less. It's actually going to be very good.
And if you don't mind, I want to pause there for a second, because the reduction of operating expenses and the reduction of CapEx expenses, just to make sure for everyone at home that's following, and it's just following now, let's put that in numbers, because we just found out in the previous slide that it costs, anywhere between $13,000 and $17,000 a ton to make this. So we're reducing it by 80.
Next slide. The next 2 slides cover this, so there's no need.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So you're ahead of me already.
Oh, yeah.
So those are the 4 highlights. Let's move on to the next one.
This is the cash cost of all the producers out there. All right. Studies done not by us, by basically solar experts and everything else. They're basically saying with present day technology system, it is difficult to envisage a selling price of solar grade silicon metal but below $15 a kilogram. And this is what you see. Now, the cheapest one is a cost of $9. All right, but you can only produce 8,000 tons per year. Then you have Alchem that's at 12, and you have the other ones that are there. They're producing at 12 and those type of issues. And everybody else goes up. If you go back, look at the bottom here, you can see that, this is at 350,000 ton, which is right now demand. It's costing them more to produce it than to sell it. So it's a great opportunity market. Now, what you basically have at the bottom is you have that slide, that red slide. It's just, what should be our cost. So if we have a true one-step process, okay, if we have a true one-step process, what that means is that our cost of making solar-grade silicon metal should be equivalent or pretty darn close to making the metallurgic-grade silicon, which is theirs. Okay. We say at the bottom, we will have the exact numbers to make the financial modeling once we have the pilot plant operational and then reach the goals of doing this.
Right, but that visual there is incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
and you can do that with some scalability, not just that price to produce 1,000 tons at the end of the day, which isn't going to make a dent in the world market. You're talking about potential real scalability.
With potential real scalability, we're talking about our plans are to limit ourselves to 10,000 ton reactors, make them efficient, make them work. So this is what we're looking at doing, all right? And if you go to the next slide, which is the CapEx part, all right, we're the only process that goes from solar grade silicon metal to, from quartz to solar grade silicon metal. Everybody else starts by buying the metallurgic grade silicon If you have a Siemens, what's called low grade process, the minimum size plant you can build to be economically has come down to 6,500 tons. Okay, so it's going to cost you anywhere from $500 million to build a new plant. To, if you want higher purity, it's going to cost you $650 million. If you want, if you go with a Silane reactor, it's going to cost you another $650 million for those small size. But Silane reactor is a big chemical plant. There's a new process out there. Maybe some of you have heard. It's called Silicor. It's aluminum refining. They're building a big plant in Iceland to do this. They're claiming that they have a capex cost of 35, which is cheaper than everybody else, but they need a minimum size plant of 19,000 tons. So here we go. We're still there at 750 million tons. Our capex cost per kilogram just at the pilot plant is $18.50. We're already competitive against those. Okay, our estimation.
So you're 50%. You're almost 50% cheaper than the Iceland model,
Yep.
which is the cheapest one out there right now.
But
you don't require the same massive spending because of the size limitations.
Exactly. And right now, our estimation for 10,000 ton units range around $4 a kilogram. Okay? So this is why we say we're 95% cheaper in CapEx. Much more flexible.
That's unbelievable. And CapEx is everything, right? Because it's the hardest thing. Most companies run to CapEx issues because they can't raise $1 billion for a mine or a plant, and that's where they always die on the vine.
Yes. So, and we have a different scalability process. There's an in-between scalability between, the 200-ton pilot plant and the 10,000-ton production unit, which we call the 2,000 ton per year first plant. That one has a capex of $7 a kilogram. But if you compare yourself to metallurgic grade silicon metal, we're competitive against those. So we're competitive against the entire spectrum. So basically, these numbers show it. Now, I understand.
Are you competitive, or are you more like an Amazon, where it seems like you're crushing it? Because
let's state that we're competitive, and we will become the Amazon when we do it. Okay. Let's realize that at the beginning, Warren Buffett said that if Amazon, it was a stupid mistake not to invest because he didn't believe in it. All right. Reality is right now what we are showing as a plan forward actually seems too good to be true, and this is why we are so focused on the pilot plant. All right. These numbers, as exciting as they are, people are really going to get gung-ho and excited about this as we get closer to have the pilot plant operational. This looks exactly the same. Remember when we started to work together, George? In 2015, we announced in September that we're going to do this. We're going to do the R&D testing, and we couldn't get traction for our life depending on it. The closer we got to the lab scale system being ready to operate, that's when we really took off. So this is what's going on right now.
And for new people at home, I want to inject here for a second that you're not doing this on your own, where other companies have failed by trying to, trial and error internally. We've got Pyrogenesis as our technology partner here and provider. And Pyrogenesis is a company, for those who don't know it, and for people who don't know Pyrogenesis, this is a company whose technology is being used on U.S. aircraft carriers, being used by DARPA.
George, just change next slide.
Come on. So
it's exactly the next slide that's there in the presentation.
So people know we haven't
scripted the material I send you sometimes. Nah, you can pull your leg. But it's exactly, see where it fits. We're working, it's one of the slides about that. This is where our process fits within the competition. And 2 slides later, I go further on explaining what we're working.
Oh, yeah, let's look at this slide. It was a great slide.
This is a slide which demonstrates why we're going to be cheaper. If you look at the number of steps that are required to produce solar grade silicon metal by our competitors, there's massive steps to it. All right. We're right now looking at doing it in 1 step. So even if at the end we need 2 step, which is like crystallization to make the thing, we're still going to be creaming them. It's not even a word. We know that we already make some pretty high purity stuff, which there's a market for it, which is a 3N. And we know that, we feel very confident that once we have the pilot plant operational, because we need volume to do tests, but those are other issues. So if you take a look at them and look at the nasty byproduct these guys are producing, all right? don't underestimate now the appeal of having a green process.
Paris, listen, Donald Trump and the Paris Environmental Accord, right? That alone tells you how important green is. It's a global, it can't be stopped, and it's necessary and required now. And industry and government won't settle for less. So this isn't 20 years ago when green was a neat thing to have in your bio as a company. It's mandatory now.
Well, it's not only mandatory. Sorry about this. It's not only mandatory. Just a joke yesterday is that, you know, Donald Trump mentioned he's going to make a solar wall between Mexico and the U.S. I'd like to have the following question. How many gigawatts of energy that's going to produce? And you multiply that by 5,000 ounces, it's more new ounce of material. You know, if it's a Buy America plant there, we just have to build a small plant the next size of Plattsburgh and we'll do it.
Yeah, between Plattsburgh and...
It's going to be insane, the opportunities that are there. So anyway, that was just the side step. Next slide. You know, everybody's seen this. The key point to understand is that management and board, we have serious skin in the game. We own 22% on a fully diluted basis. Our key investors are there. We have institution. As one of the directors mentioned yesterday at the AGM, one of the things we are going through is there's a sort of a rotation in our shareholder base in the sense that we're moving away from the speculative investors that were there thinking there would be another Temenko run to the institutional type of investors that are seeing the true potential coming in. So institutional, you know, retail investors, I always say as a rule of thumb, it takes me 4 months to convince them to buy. That's really the way it works. If you look at the logic, that's really how the way it works, because last year, September, October, November, December, I did a lot of, you know, marketing and everything else. And I think that was one of the reasons why on January 26th, when we issued that news, fortunately, everybody knows that there was an event that happened in my life, which mean I took a leave of absence. So, you know, the push that I'm redoing in marketing is going to be effective in a few months as we have more and more news coming online. So overall, the key point is management is serious skin in the game. We have a good cash position, which is mostly due to the fact that we own significant, you know, share position in Pyrogenesis, and the fact that we don't really have anything to pay until the end of the year when Pyro delivers the plant, because we paid much of it. So we'll continue. And
do you want to touch on that point, the number of shares that the company's acquired in Pyrogenesis and what they're worth today, given the
well, it's known, it's out there. We own 1 million shares and 500,000 warrants. So it's non-dilutive cash. I think it was a good negotiation move on our part to being able to acquire those shares a year ago in a private placement.
And Pyrogenesis just continues to grow, so that non-dilutive cash should, there's no guarantee, but should continue to grow, all other things be equal.
All things being equal, but you know, eventually when we have payments to do it, I think it's better to do this than to do other financing. But that's another issue for another day. Let's go to the next slide. Well, everybody knows this one. I'd like to pay a special attention to people about the solar wafer. What happens is, I've been in discussion with a few solar companies and everything else, and the more I understand our field of where we're working, is it probably because it's not the most expensive step going from producing silicon metal to making the wafer. And there are ways for us to do it economically because we could do it at the tail end of our production. So there are, you know, energy savings and all those type of things. So we're thinking more and more internally about going all the way full Monty, all the way to making the solar systems.
Right. That's the first time hearing of that. So I'm sure everyone at home is going to like hearing that as well.
The reason why we go to the wafer part is very simple. Is we've learned through discussion with people in the solar industry that to get our product to be validated, to be accepted, to be taken by solar manufacturers, we will have anyway to go all the way to wafer making, show that our material can be as efficient as the highest out there, which is what Alchem has done, and they've demonstrated they can do 21% with a 4N plus by doing this. So by default, we will have to go there just to validate. So if we're going to go there just to validate, you know, that way it's going to be much better because even though we have a patent and everything else, a lot of our advantage is really our recipe, and they've been developed by pyrogenesis. So the more we can keep in-house, and the only thing we sell is the wafer at the end, it's better. Because a wafer is very easy to test, what's the efficiency? Next slide. Which one is it? Hey, this is why we work with pyrogenesis. We've been working with pyrogenesis since 2015. One of the biggest advantage of this is since the beginning, pyrogenesis is a publicly traded company. So if there was anything negative going on our project, I couldn't hide it. They would have to issue it too. So
yep, which is a big plus.
That's a big plus. So there's nothing in that. Second of all, they have an operational track record that's second to none. They have done things where I would dare to say make a list of people that said it was impossible to do, they've done. And they have a business approach as opposed to a laboratory approach. So the key part to that is that when we started our discussion with them, they were already thinking scalability. One of the great advantages of working with pyrogenesis is that there's such a depth of talent, is that you're not depending on one person. So just to give a funny example, the head engineer in charge of the project at the beginning, he took a paternity leave, which is totally normal, fine, everything's okay. So they had another engineer take over the project. Well, they gave the other engineer take over the project, and they gave him a different spin that, you work on purity, he had to work on scalability. So he did all his work on scalability, and he got us some great results. When I think we go to the next slide, I think that's where we are. Yeah. Go to the next slide. So he worked on scalability. So the first, if you take proof of concept, was the guy that was the engineer at the beginning that was really gung-ho about the purity part of the work. He went. Second engineer went and was more focused on scalability, which was normal. We had ordered a pilot plan. So a lot of the testing we were doing were basically based on the scaling up process, and we've announced fantastic results. So if you look from test 24 to test 32, which we announced in January, he increased the size of the machine, and he was able to increase the yield by 9,000%. Well, the engineer that was there at the beginning came back, retook over the project, and restarted to focus again on purity. So what did he do? He shrank again the size of the machine back to what he had at the beginning, working at the beginning. But with all the process improvement done, he was able now to get a higher yield. So we got another 531%. So now what we've seen is we can increase yield by increasing the size of the machine, but we tend to take the advantage learned, and we can basically increase yield now by getting a better, more efficient burn rate of the process as it goes through. There are multiples of limitation of what we can do at lab scale. So we're working with those constraints. But these results have been so fascinating by the guys at Pyrogenesis. They came up with the idea, says, okay, I think now we reach a point where we understand the scalability of the system well enough that the next thing we want to test at lab scale is the semi-continuous process system. So in a certain way, the pilot plant is a 1/2000 scaling up of that lab scale machine, the process. But it's a semi-continuous process. Well, now what they're actually doing in reverse is they're doing a mini pilot plant. So we'll be able now to run continuous tests. So as opposed to having material that we picked up and we have to chunk off the bottom of the crucible, we eventually will be in a position where small ingots of material will be poured. That probably will also give us better purity results in our sample areas. But that it means that in a certain way, the pilot plant is on schedule, as we've announced, but a part of the pilot plant testing is in advance as the new machine was coming on. So as we said in our last press release, right now the guys at Pyros are doing all the design, all the work, and I was under the impression that they wouldn't be doing any purity testing until the new machine was up. But since they realized it was going to take them a bit longer, they've kept the old machine there, and we're working on purity now. We've just started some purity tests using high purity material.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about. So that's why we haven't seen some results in a while.
There's two reasons, actually. We have a batch of material that we haven't tested, so you haven't seen any results because nothing has been sent to an outside laboratory. Because getting it down to 3N, it's fine, right? But once you start going, people have to realize that 3N is 1,000 ppm. 4N is 100 ppm. 5N is 10 ppm. We've gotten it down to 323 ppm, and we're now trying to remove it down from 320 to 100 to 10. Problem is that there are some impurities that we don't really care that much about, because we know that direct segregation will be able to get them out of the way. So we're focusing on a few impurities. Second problem that we're having is, it's not problems, problem we're having is not reality that we're dealing with, is at lab scale we sometimes produce a material that isn't homogeneous. So it influences what type of the decision we're going through. So instead of us going on a wrong tangent because we didn't do a test, we decided to take, a step back. And that was written in the press release, that we were going to review the entire process, how we're going to be doing it. And what our review led us to do is actually to go back one step in our testing protocol, to go back to doing scanning electronic microscope testing, because we didn't think we needed it anymore, because, scanning electronic microscope doesn't give you any more data above 3M. But we've suddenly realized that doing the scanning electronic microscope is very important for us to figure out the structure of the material that we have produced at lab scale. And that structure then becomes the key to choosing which pathways of testing you're going to be doing for which impurities. Because at this stage, we're much more focusing on a few impurities as opposed to focusing on all the spectacle of impurities.
So I'm going to ask a question that people are thinking at home right now. They're hearing that, which is great. They're hearing how you're solving that challenge, the reality.
Mm-hmm.
When does the company have a ballpark ETA of when results will start being sent in for analysis, or when you'll be able to analyze and get some results back? Because I know that's what people are thinking at home. So
I know. But what we're realizing that when we start to deal with the 4N, 5N type of testing, everything is much more complicated for two reasons. There's not too many laboratories that can do it. Some of the laboratories that claim they can do it, they give you results that are off there. I've spoken to people in the solar business where at the end they have to go teach the laboratory how to do the testing. And we have other laboratories that says we can do it, but we can do it for you, but we have proprietary process that we can't show it to you. So it's like we can't announce those. So the process now requires one step in between. That step is going to the SEM at Polytechnic. What I can say is, we approved the process 3 weeks ago, but it took us 2 weeks to get an appointment. So if my memories are correct, I think it's this week we're going to that laboratory. Those results will indicate where we're going for the additional test. What I can say, and I'm going to say in the press release that's going to come out about the AGM vote, and I said that at the presentation, is that we will be testing material that are both from our low batch feedstock and material from our high batch feedstock. But what we're trying to get now is a true baseline, a true understanding where the baseline is, because people have to realize that, a 1% variation in our results, which I have seen results with different laboratories for the same materials that come with different addition 1%, 1,000 ppm. So it requires us a bit more time to do this. But it doesn't change the overall.
You're still on track for the pilot plant. You're going to the pilot plant.
And we know that there's some process that can only be done at pilot plant. We know that.
And I think that's the most important part, that everything is going so well right now. You're going to pilot plant. You're going to be able to produce profitable batches of profitable tonnage of product. So at that point,
let me address a point very clearly. Okay, the pilot plant isn't designed for us to generate revenue. The pilot plant for us is to validate the economic costs, scalability, and everything else. We're doing a scaling up that's 1 to 2,000. Okay, all the additional scale ups are minuscule compared to what we're dealing with. What the pilot's plant will allow us to have is enough material produced to probably produce some sample wafers. B, have complete costing of what we're going to be able to design a complete financial modeling what we're going, which is exactly what a pilot plant is supposed to do, right? So, but it's extraordinarily important phase, and it's really the key point. And it's where the value is, and everybody's sort of waiting for us to get the pilot plan ready, because that's when serious people will want to throw serious money at the project, in my humble opinion.
All right. Do we go through any more slides, or we covered the gist?
We've been talking about this. Just go quickly. Just go quickly. That one's self-explanatory. Just shows in the market we are. Next one. Just a timeline, guys. We're still on timeline, still on target, still moving forward. No changes. Good news is, as I said, we're working pyrogenesis. If timeline changes, we both have to announce it.
So we see here phase 3, hot commission of pilot plant scheduled for November 2017.
Yeah.
And testing and operating pilot plant scheduled from March of 2018. So we're there.
Yeah, right now we're there. Okay, next slide quickly. Financial numbers. Okay, let's be clear. We've been very transparent about our costs and everything else. I'm still surprised that people are like, oh, they're in a state of shock that we have to raise money. We've been saying this for the last year and a half. So it is there. We're on target. We've already paid close to 90% of the plant. The rest of it is operational costs.
Can you talk to government funding? Are you applying for government funding?
Yes,
and
we're
potential possible?
Yes, we've applied. You know, it's the timing was just shitty when the government came back to talk to me is when my son died. It screwed up a little bit of everything else. I got back and we started to talk. We sent in the documents. We're in discussion with them. It's government bureaucracy. It's essential about this and all those type of things. But it's working forward. Those are the type of subject, until I have something, I can't really say anything about it. The only thing I can say is the application has been filed. We got one with the federal government, and there's other things we're going to be going. So
here's the most important thing. Your projected cash call next 24 months is ballpark $4 million. So very doable, nothing that's going to cost. I've seen some companies where the projected cash call is at $88 million next 2 years. Like, where are they going to find that money? So, $4 million.
Well, $4 million is not really an issue. My problem right now is I would like the government to basically make up their mind. Because when I talk to investors, okay, so are you talking as far as to buy in the market, which is not the same thing, or investing in the project? So, and I tell them, well, I'm waiting for the government to come along. Because we don't really need money till the end of the year. We are the only Canadian or in the world pure play in the growing silicon metal market. We're the only
solar grade silicon market.
Solar grade silicon metal. Bench tests have validated that we have the only process in the world that will purify at the same time we transform quartz to silicon metal. Graduated pilots. So basically, recap that people understand: low OPEX, low CAPEX, minimal carbon footprints, 200-ton plant taking 88.1, making 99.97 is very good. If we go through some of the appendix, George, there's just a few of them I'd like, we can go quickly through them.
Yeah, sure.
Just visually, so people to see what's the difference with 98.1, and it's there. Next slide is really more informative, but this explained at the beginning, that 2004 area, that's the Temenko situation. What happened was Germany basically said, oh, we're going off nuclear, we're going to solar power. And people, the best way to make solar power is using polysilicon. Demand went through the roof, just like lithium right now. Okay? Look what happened. Massive amount of capacity got built. Barely now has been digested. And then next slide is just other people confirming everything I've been saying. So it's not just like I'm just not taking one source and cherry picking. I got,
right.
2 source companies saying this. So come to the next slide. Next slide, it just says the same thing. Next slide says the same thing from a different company. So look, it's pretty.
And by the way, everyone should know we're not asking them to review this in the time we're going through it. This presentation is going to be available, if not already,
on the website. Yeah,
on HPQ's website and on Agoracom.
Yeah,
It'll be available later.
Our goal is for those that couldn't have made it to the AGM to basically have about the same speeches I made at the AGM.
Right. But you're not offering anybody wine. That's the only difference here.
There was no wine offered. I'm cheap. Water.
Shareholders, we have it here then.
Green stuff. Jump to the next one. Not this one. This is one I think people should realize is really important. Right now, our competitors are Chinese manufacturer of solar grade silicon metal. Although they're big players in the field, they've done a lot of things. So what the world is doing, the Europeans are doing now, to basically deal with their overly subsidized production, is they're now asking for what's called a life cycle CO2 emission of a process. 70% of a life cycle emission of a process comes from making the solar grade silicon metal. So when we say we cut it by 75, we were benchmarking ourselves versus the European. If we were benchmarking ourselves over the Chinese, we would be 300%. So as this becomes more and more clear, right now, if you decide to buy a Chinese solar system, it will take you 30 years to clean up the CO2 life cycle emission we have. If you're going to buy our process, it's going to take you a year.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. That's unbelievable.
We have a green advantage. That's really the one we're shooting at. That's the point. That's the point that nobody wants to talk about, but I will be screaming about it out there in the market. Next slide. Okay. Final slide I want to talk about is people have to realize, oh, what happens if we can't make solar grade silicon metal? Blah, 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 blah. Take a look at the regular silicon metal market. All right. It's still a $6 billion a year business growing 6% year over year. Prices at $2,000. All right. That's what it is. Next slide is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, that's our worst case scenario.
That's a worst case scenario. We know that the pure VAP is disruptive even in traditional metallurgical place. How is it? Our CapEx costs are about maybe 10% cheaper than the other one, but our process can be much smaller. We know, and this is what this number shows, we know that we only need 2 raw material. So we're already cutting our raw material cost by 10%. And the other thing that we're working on, because I've been told that by government people, is when you make silicon metal in any type of process, you actually end up producing carbon monoxide, which is bad for the environment according to Paris Protocol. So you have to buy carbon credit. Even though we reduce it, our reduction isn't equivalent to what we do in the production. We're in discussion. We've been in discussion for a little while to figure a way how we could recuperate our carbon, and we have, I think, a good track on that record. So I think by the time we have a process ready, we will be able to recuperate our carbon. So we could actually be the only completely green process to make metallurgical grade silicon metal. And that will have a significant impact on the bottom line of the process, because the most expensive raw material to make silicon metal is the carbon. Next. Oh, yes. What we're doing, 3N plus, there's a market for it. That's our competitors. That's their quality sheet where they're issuing. Just notice, it's the ferro solar division of that company. What does that mean? They have to process that material to make it reach that grade. Next slide. I just wanted people to realize that there's a market for what we're doing in purity. Much more complicated, but this is where it gets for people to be realized. We're not at a stage where we don't need to focus that much attention on the 5N, 6N, 7N, because we've been starting to understand that in a certain part, having some ends of materials that don't really affect the solar system isn't that important. So we're now stopping down to working on a few materials. And the total metals, we know they can be removed through the crystallization process. So we're now focusing more on specific impurities. And that's what makes everything more complicated, because, you know, one of the laboratory tests we do will give us, you know, good results for boron, but not good results for the rest. Those are the issues we have to deal with. So since we're focused on the solar grade business, that's where it is. Next step, next slide is just for information. This is the only process in the world that can make UMG that is as efficient as polysilicon solar grade silicon metal. Those are all the steps they've gone through. That was in 2013. Next slide. So they started to figure out from then on, they've combined 2-step to make it better. They went to ingot and they go to wafer. That's how they managed to be competitive.
All right, so we'll end it there.
Yep.
Quick note. I want to tell people about something, and we're going to make an official announcement that, you know, you've got great information. You're at the AGM. You're talking to people in the industry, and you don't always get a chance to communicate with shareholders beyond what we're doing here, which is excellent, which is better than anything anybody else does. However, we're going to be launching something called CEO Verified imminently, which will provide, which basically means Bernard will be logged into Agoracom via LinkedIn. He'll be verified, and you'll be able to talk to him by posting messages on Agoracom, on the HPQ hub, obviously, and having Bernard, you know, every couple of days, every 3 days or so, because he's got a job to do.
Every 3 days.
Talking
once a week, maybe. Let's not push every 3 days.
Well, you're not going to have that many questions, but talk to investors directly, because we're finding that there are other message boards around where speculation just runs rampant and crazy ideas are out there. And it's about time to start getting the information from the source, correct?
Yeah, it's about time. It's actually good to have one spot. So what we're going to do is we're going to amalgam all the questions that we get, and those that seems to be repeating, and where, maybe our press release wasn't clear enough and everything else. Let's be very specific. There'll be no secret information, nothing else.
Yeah, of course, no material, new information, but clarification and all that kind of stuff.
It will be a way to discuss, interesting points that can come into. So, don't feel bad if I don't reply to your emails and everything else, but you're gonna have to go on Agoracom to get the answer, because I will probably.
And that's a superior model at the end of the day, not just because of Agoracom, but you get a question, you answer that question. Everybody sees the question. Everybody sees the answer.
Yeah.
And there's no misinterpretation. Nor can someone say, "I just got this email from Bernard who says that we're about to hit 9N tomorrow," and look at the email because they can go in there and make changes to it. This is a post, you answer, or somebody from the company answers. Everybody sees it at the same time. So we're really pumped up about that. It's the brand new social media platform for small
I've been pushing you because I think I sort of got burned a bit by you like to have an open line of conversation with your shareholders, but at one point you sort of realize that it's sort of becoming counterproductive. So instead of playing the game course of information where we speak, and that's going to be there. It's
all right,
just going to be another communication tool.
We're going to sign off there. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Bernard, as always, amazing. You had the AGM yesterday, and now you've had a mini virtual AGM. Everyone appreciates it. And I always say, I'm going to end off with this. When someone's confident enough to face you on video for the record, permanently out there for everyone to see, then they've got to be extremely confident in what they're doing and what they're saying. And Bernard, you definitely have our confidence, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody. Talk to you soon.